We are doing the numerology and the astrology for January 4th, 2021. If you add all those numbers together, you get the number 10. And the number 10 is about power and responsibility with power. The number 1, if you add the 1 and the 0 together, you get a 1, is about individuality, being humble, being authentic, being sincere, being very real. So today is a day where we get to begin again. We can create a world where anything is possible. It is up to us, and I believe that until we harness this power of unified acceptance and love, that real magical powers will be held back from human consciousness. They must be, because of the destructive tendency of human nature. Self-control must be learned, and compassion a requirement before such gifts and powers can be unleashed in this world again. But they are there, and they rear their heads up from time to time, in dreams, in visions, in moments of balance and clarity. And it is one of those moments today. But without the grounding, a stable core, and a heart that is stronger than the domains of right and wrong, and stronger than the ego to make sense out of, it won't work very well. Today, notice, listen, write down the dreams, seek out that which is hidden, learn to work with those layers within the deepest core. Dispel self-importance and give ego nothing to feed upon. The astrology today. The moon drives our inner perfectionist while it is in Virgo. Notice that there is a deep feeling of success when we fix that thing that has been broken or bothering us. Jupiter semi-squares Neptune, and our innate idealism is in full swing. We might see some new places of inspiration and advancement. It's time to ban the unrealistic and inflated ego perceptions. We cannot heal everyone or take anyone through the door than ourselves. Once we are through the door, and only then, can we hold a doorway open for other people to choose as an option and be that guiding inspiration to step out of the karmic suffering and into their potential. Our way is not another's path. Try to simply be a light that inspires those that can see to seek out truth. Never minimize the essential steps and details that will be necessary going forward. Be ruthless in our perception of self-deception. But notice when the ego will try to jump into even that good intention. Remove insistence and petulant, childish demands in ourself and the universe. They will not work anyway, especially at this time. While there are often hidden meanings in things, it is essential to not go too far, because this will cause dangerous obsession and paranoid thinking that will become manipulative if allowed to continue. Do not get into a battle of words. Use the tension to motivate us to make useful, grounded, and stabilizing choices. Monday evening can help us ground our ideas and bring them back down to earth. If we don't do that, we may just feel mentally overloaded and want to avoid the hard truth right in front of us. My quote for today: be ruthless in your perception of self-deception. Dispel self-importance and give ego nothing to feed upon. And my blog for today. Do you ever wonder why we are so fascinated with magical movies with hidden superpowers? Do you ever wonder why we dream, and in those dreams we discover that we can fly and that we have other magical attributes? I believe that the evolution of mankind is older than we want to believe, and that there were times when the gravitational field on this earth was less dense and easier to manipulate. But what happened? As in all great stories, some sort of calamity occurred and the Earth's gravity became more dense, which actually is an actual scientific fact that was discovered a few decades ago. And for some reason, we lost touch with maybe those powers, and magical skills had become suppressed. But hidden in our deep subconscious, in our very DNA, something still remembers and consistently reminds us of that latent hidden potential that is there waiting, watching, guiding, and inspiring us to act in accordance with divine law and to become better, more honest, more inspired, and more aware. But great power is only given when a soul has learned how to unconditionally loving, how to be unconditionally loving, and how to use that power for the greater good. And therein lies the problem. It is about understanding that when great things are given, great responsibility is required. Somehow, we still have egos so strong that they get caught up in having power over. And that is not what it is about. I cannot tell you how many people I personally know that encountered something within them. Healing powers, telepathic powers, intuitive powers, all sorts of things. But inevitably, someone or themselves got too puffed up and full of ego and manipulated those powers not for the greater good, but for personal gain. And once that began, the powers also began to diminish until they disappeared altogether. I understand that it is human nature to want to capitalize and monetize in our culture of greed. The haves and the have-nots are constantly battling it out. But when essential goodness is thrown away in favor of power and the almighty dollar, it is a travesty and a deep loss of the innate human potential. While I do not expect this to change in my lifetime, I hope to plant some seeds that will be out there to cultivate the types of hearts that feed the souls of those that see the path and are willing to walk it. Many years ago, there was a television show, and they were these adventurers, and they were going through a particular place, and they were in Java, and one of the guys got an eye infection, and he went to this. They said, "Oh, you have to go to this acupuncturist over here," and so this guy put needles in, and he then held on to the needles, and all of a sudden you see this guy's arms jumping, and and the needles are like in his eyes right here, and his arms are jumping, and this guy is going, "What are you doing to me?" And he says, "I'm just sending electricity through these 2 points." And they were like, "Well, that's incredible. Like, I mean, can you?" And this was filmed. I mean, this is actually a film. And they were like, "Can you do more things?" And he goes, "Well, yeah." And they were like, "Well, like what?" And he goes, "Well, I can set things on fire." And they were like, "What? You can set things on fire?" And so, he, was, of course, bare-chested, and because we're in Java. And, he has people wad up paper, and you watch them wad up the paper and put it on the floor, the stone floor. And then he puts his hand over it, and he starts to put energy through his hands. And all of a sudden, the paper just like bursts into flames. And they were just like, "Oh my God, how did you get this power?" And he said, "Well, I learned that I had to push my first chakra and my second chakra together, and I'm going to get this wrong, but I think this is right, that the first chakra is positive and the second chakra is negative, and when you push the 2 together, you get an electrical charge between the positive and the negative." And so after this video came out, you can imagine that, people all over the place are coming to see him, and he said in the video that he was not given the power until the energies that control this domain knew that he would not use it to do harm. Because you can imagine, if you could set something on fire, you could set a person on fire, like you could murder somebody, right? And so they needed to know that he wasn't going to use it for negativity. And what he discovered was, after this video went out and everybody wanted to see him and everybody wanted him to prove his skill and everybody wanted to do this, that he found himself getting a little puffed up, and he found himself, accepting money, from people because they were just so overwhelmed. And even if he wasn't charging, they were just so shocked. They wanted to hand him money, and all of a sudden his ego is getting attached to the money and everything. And all of a sudden his power started going away. And he literally had to stop doing that behavior. He could only work on the locals, and he had to stop this behavior of kind of being a sideshow. And, powers are kind of like that. People have asked me to do like, parties and stuff like that. And don't get me wrong, it's like if somebody wants to do a party, I have to have my own room. I need a room that I can close the door, because I'm notorious for saying something in a group dynamic that probably everybody else doesn't know, and then all of a sudden it creates this big problem and a big brouhaha, and people are crying, and people cry a lot of times in my office. And so I like to have readings be private and personal. But the problem also when you become like a party favor is this energy dynamic, that you're navigating with all these people throwing all this energy at you, which can be very confusing for me at the same time, because I'm not just trying to read the person over here, but then I'm feeling all of this energy coming at me from other places. So it's just easier to be one-on-one and work with one person, or, a couple, because then you can see the dynamic of the energy between the two of them. Just to keep the energy clean and simple, and to keep non-attached. I remember years ago that I was working with a gentleman who had MS, and I worked with him every 2 weeks for 12 years. And we talked about a lot of things, and I was doing a lot of channeling as I was doing craniosacral with him, and some of the most amazing things were coming out of my mouth, and literally it'd come out of my mouth, and I knew I was channeling, and I knew I couldn't grab a hold of it, and I'd be like, oh God, I should get a tape recorder. And every time I'd get a tape recorder and bring it in, of course it never happened, because the universe can tell that my ego was getting attached or hooked into what they were saying, and would try to take that as I was saying it, right? Instead of what they were saying. And sometimes those moments are very precious, and they're for you personally. They're not for everyone. They're not, a lot of people are not ready to hear certain things. And so I think it's a real tricky time that we're in right now, because so much is being televised, and there's so much going on the air, and people make a lot of money off of having some sort of a magical skill. And I say this phrase a lot, and people will hear it again today, and I say anyone can learn a magical skill, not everyone can use it with integrity. Because I remember a very well-known psychic came to me, and it was, it's unusual for another well-known psychic to come to another psychic, because there's usually a competition, and I don't compete, I don't play that game, but I know other people do. And so anyway, she came in, and she was concerned because she had a man in her life that was trying to capitalize on her psychic ability, and was forcing her to charge exorbitant amounts of money, and to do large groups. And I'm not saying that everybody who does this is in this situation. I'm just saying this particular person was. And what was happening was that was out of alignment with who she was. And what was happening was she was losing her psychic ability, because, again, it was for greed. It was to please him, and it wasn't for the real intention that she had started doing it, which was to help people. Intention is everything, and having the stability to continue using intuitive and magical tools and skills requires a tremendous amount of authenticity and realness, and a tremendous amount of inner work and clarity and grounding. I feel like all I do is work on myself. I feel like all I do is meditate and go inward and try and really look at issues and figure out where I'm attached. Because where I'm attached, or where I have unresolved issues, I will not be able to be clear in a reading for somebody else. So if I'm going to be a good reader, I have to be really clear within my own self and within my own issues, because otherwise you see a lot of different healers and people project that onto other people. And of course, I'm not perfect. I've made tons of mistakes and failed. But it is that place of when something is really working and the divine is flowing through you, you know it. You know it, and it's a powerful force that takes over, and there's a feeling like nothing you've ever had, because you know it's not you. And so I look at all of these beautiful movies about magicians and the magic and these psychic skills and intuitive skills and that people can have on movies and television. And I really believe that we have that potential. I believe that we wouldn't be having these dreams and we wouldn't be having these movies if the universe wasn't trying to show us where we have our potential. But the hardest thing to do is to get your ego out of the way. The hardest thing to do is to not be attached to the money or the outcome. And over again, that keeps coming up for where we are at this particular time in history. And I think we have to reclaim our heart. I think we have to reclaim kindness. I think we have to do it not because it makes us feel special, but because, you know, it's something that we want to share, and we want to share our tools and our gifts and our skills because we care, you know, not because we want something in return from it. And I think the more that we do that, the smoother it gets, and the more in alignment it gets. And I think the universe does reward you, but it doesn't reward you in the way your ego thinks it's going to reward you. And that's perfect, because if we kept doing things and our ego kept getting fed, there's just no way the ego isn't going to grow. So it's perfect that we do get something back, but it's an energetic amount of flow. It's not about money. It's about other stuff. So anyway, you guys have a good rest of your day.